The VIP wing of Thorne Medical Center was a sanctuary of white marble and glass. However, Mrs. Thorne, a dignified woman in a royal blue hospital gown, was being wheeled out of her suite into the common hallway. She had been recovering from a minor procedure, but the morning staff had lost her premium insurance file. Sloane, a nurse with a reputation for elitism, stood over her. She wore bold red scrubs that stood out aggressively against the sterile white walls. Behind her was Vance, the head of nursing, wearing a black lab coat over a bold red shirt, his arms crossed in a posture of cold indifference. Sloane's face contorted into a realistic, unmasked expression of aggressive rage. She viewed Mrs. Thorne as an indigent patient who had mistakenly been placed in the high-rent wing. Her nostrils flared, and a pulsing vein began to throb in her neck as she snatched a water pitcher from the woman's side table. This wing is for people who can actually contribute to the city, not charity cases who lose their paperwork. Sloane hissed. "My son is coming to handle the bill, dear. Please, I just need my medication," Mrs. Thorne said, her voice trembling but steady. Sloane's aggression turned physical. She lunged forward and delivered a heavy-handed, aggressive shove to the back of the wheelchair, slamming the front wheels into a white marble pillar to stop the woman from moving. "You're being moved to the county ward now." Sloane snarled, her face showing anatomical micro-expressions of fury. His brow furrowed into deep ridges and her eyes widening in anger. In a display of unchecked cruelty, Sloane grabbed the royal blue blanket from Mrs. Thorne's lap and violently threw it onto the floor, leaving the elderly woman exposed to the cold hallway air. Sloane then grabbed Mrs. Thorne by the arm, jerking her out of the chair, while Vance signaled the orderlies to clear the room. The witnesses, Sterling and Maya, stood by the nurse's station, their phones raised to capture the raw, unmasked fury on Sloane's face as she physically manhandled the patient. "Walk your own way out," Sloane hissed, her nostrils flaring. At that moment, the heavy glass doors at the end of the hall swung open. Cassius stepped through, his deep navy silk suit casting a long shadow over the marble floor. He saw his mother being held by the arm, her blanket on the ground. "Sloane," Cassius said, his voice a low, lethal deep navy frequency, "you should have checked the name on the building before you touched my mother." The sterile, white tile hallway of the Thorne Medical Center became an arena of absolute dread. Sloane maintained her physical grip, her fingers digging into the frail arm of Mrs. Thorne, while she stood over the discarded royal blue blanket. Sloane's unmasked face was a portrait of unchecked aggressive rage. The veins in her neck pulsed with a toxic high, and her nostrils flared as she prepared to deliver another insult. Vance, the head of nursing, stood by with his arms crossed over his black lab coat, his face twisted in a sneer of elitist indifference toward the poor woman. "I don't care who your son is," Sloane hissed, her face contorting with anatomical micro-expressions of fury, her brow furrowing into deep ridges and her eyes widening in anger as she leaned into Mrs. Thorne's personal space. "In this wing, I am the law, and the law says you're being dumped on the sidewalk where people like you belong." Cassius moved with the predatory grace of man, who owned the very air Sloane was breathing. He reached his mother's side in 3 long strides, his deep navy silk suit shimmering under the surgical lights. He didn't waste words. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a gold-stamped ownership deed and his yellow-cased master tablet. He didn't call security. He triggered the blackout protocol for the entire hospital's administrative network. "The only person being dumped on the sidewalk today, Sloane, is you," Cassius said, his voice a low, vibrating deep navy frequency that seemed to chill the very marrow in Sloane's bones. Suddenly, every digital patient chart and monitor in the VIP wing, the ones Vance used to manage the elite clientele, flickered to a solid royal blue screen. A second later, they began broadcasting a bold, extreme close-up video of the last 5 minutes. The entire board of directors, currently in a meeting downstairs, watched in stunned silence as the screens displayed Sloane's snarling face and aggressive shove as she physically manhandled a woman whose family name was etched in marble at the hospital entrance. Sloane's grip on Mrs. Thorne's arm went limp. Her face turned a sickly, mottled shade of gray as she looked up at the monitors and saw her own career being dismantled in 8K resolution. The uneven skin texture on her face reflected the flickering blue light of her professional demise. The heavy security doors burst open. A team of executive auditors and hospital police in black tactical gear with yellow lettering swarmed the floor. Sterling in his gold silk blazer and Maya in her silver designer dress stepped forward. Their phones raised to capture the raw, unmasked terror on Sloane's face as she realized she had just assaulted the mother of the man who signed her paychecks. "Sloane and Vance," the hospital administrator announced, his voice cold and final. "By order of the Thorne Medical Group, you are summarily terminated for gross misconduct, patient abuse, and violation of the Thorne Ethics Charter. Your licenses are being flagged for immediate review by the state board." Cassius straightened his deep navy silk lapels and stepped into Sloane's personal space, his gold luxury watch catching the clinical glare of the lights. "You told my mother she was a charity case. Sloane, the truth is, you're the one who's out of a job, out of career, and out of time in my building." Vance, in a state of aggressive panic, tried to stumble back toward the nurse's station. He was instantly intercepted. Two security officers firmly grabbed Vance by his arms, twisting him behind his back in a brutal, bone-deep lock. They forced him to his knees on the very spot where Mrs. Thorne's blanket lay. Sloane was grabbed by her bold red scrubs and forced down beside him. "Liquidate their credentials," Cassius commanded. The security team ripped the ID badges from their chests and the black lab coat from Vance's shoulders, tossing them into a green biohazard bin. They physically dragged Sloane and Vance to the center of the VIP wing, their shoes squeaking on the white marble as the other staff members and high-profile patients jeered and filmed the disgrace. They were dragged out the service entrance and left on the pavement. Cassius knelt and picked up the royal blue blanket, gently wrapping it back around his mother. He looked at the administrator. "Fire every person on this shift who stood by and watched this happen. I want a new team of specialists here within the hour." He checked his gold watch. "Mother, let's go home. I think it's time we bought a new hospital anyway." The power was destroyed. The truth was revealed. And the villain was liquidated.